Welcome, people of the World Wide Web. So it's the weekend. I'm Cypher Sigma, and we are here for another movie review, as that is what I always put out on the weekends. So yes, so I went to see this last weekend, but it's near the end, so I didn't have time to release it. So I went to see this with my wife, and it was If. So If is the new John Krasinski movie. If you've seen posters around, you've seen a big purple character and stuff like this. So to give you some emphasis on the story, because it isn't a bit clear, it is basically you have this young girl called B. The movie starts, you see her growing up as a child in her grandmother's house, which you don't quite know about until a little bit later, with her dad and her mum, and then it becomes quite apparent that her mum's ill and then obviously passes away. Fast forward into her teens, so very quickly, and then you have her moving back to New York to her grandmother's house with her grandmother, and her dad is in hospital, who's played by John Krasinski, and he is going in for an operation, and there's all this kind of concern that he may go the same way as his wife, not his mum. And then this is where B, in her kind of journeys around New York, comes across If's imaginary creatures, and it is then her journey to kind of help Ryan Reynolds' character to get the imaginary friends kind of back with the people that they belong to. She tries to rehome them or find new people, but realizes that actually they are. So obviously, when you have an imaginary friend, when you grow up, this is where the imaginary friends go off, and they have nothing kind of to do. They look for new friends, but they don't find them, so they want people to reconnect, and that's kind of what she does, leading all up to a kind of happy ending, as you would see in this You movie from John Krasinski. So there is a bit after the very end of the credits. Me and my wife were the only ones stayed. This is basically it doesn't relate to the story. It's basically just an honourable mention to one of the actors in it, who is Louis Gossett Jr. He plays Louis the teddy bear. Unfortunately, this was his last role, so it's kind of in memory, and they have a few pictures of Louis, the character he plays at the end, with a little in memory of. So there's no need, if you want to stay. You want to stay, you can do, but it's just in memory of. There's nothing. I thought the story and everything was okay, but I'll get more into it when we go into the spoiler warning. So there it is. It's I don't think it's by far his great John Krasinski's work, and I'll get into it. I want to put a spoiler warning up, so there it is. So let's get into it. So as I said, the story starts. You have this kind of video footage montage of this young girl, B, who's the main character, growing up, and her parents, and then you have flashes of her mum kind of in a hospital room with kind of a bandana over her head, and you can't really see any hair. So I'm assuming it's some sort of cancer. This is never answered. You never know exactly how she died, why she died, the reason why. You have this flashback, and then literally B is a teenager. She's with her grandmother, and she's travelling back to the place where all these memories were done. So obviously on a summer holiday, she would go to her grandmother's house, and she would paint stuff and that. So she then goes to the hospital. That's where she, when we first introduce proper introduction to Dad, and that is what he's called. He doesn't have a name. He's Dad by John Krasinski. He's kind of a lovable character. He's very funny. He sets up kind of little funny kind of scenarios when his daughter comes, because he's obviously trying to put a spin on it. Again, he's in a hospital. He's having what they class as a minor surgery or something. You never know what. He has a T-shirt that says "broken heart." Whether it's to do with his heart, who knows? That is never answered. To me, that's one of the issues with this movie, but we'll get into it anyway. So B goes, meets him, sees him a few times. As she goes back, she also meets another young lad who's in the hospital. There's some interaction. That is kind of her going back and forward. As she goes home one night, she kind of stumbles across a kind of, as I was, a very classic modern Mickey Mouse kind of looking character, and this is Blossom. She seems to be hiding in the building or something, so B follows her up into the top floor. So her grandmother lives in kind of a flat in this massive New York building. She chases her up to the top floor, and she can hear somebody's voice with inside this kind of room that she's hiding in, and it's Ryan Reynolds' very distinctive voice, so we know who it is. An old lady comes out and kind of scares her off the first time, and she kind of runs away. Then the next day she kind of follows her again and manages to get into this room, and this is where she's introduced to the character of Ryan Reynolds, who's called Cal. He is obviously housing Blossom, who's played by Phoebe Waller-Bridge. He also is housing he is also looking after, because actually she doesn't break in, apologies, I've got that wrong. She actually follows, she goes upstairs, they leave, she follows them to someone's house, and it is Blue has snuck out. So the big purple thing is called Blue. It's voiced by Steve Carell. He's basically lost his childhood friend, and he's trying to find a new one, but obviously because of how big he is, he can come across quite scary. Ryan Reynolds tries to sneak in. There's a little kind of scenario of them possibly waking up, and as they get out, this is when B spots them, and then this is when they go back to the house. Apologies, I've slightly got that wrong. This is kind of when B starts to realise, obviously, Ryan Reynolds is there. He has kind of a mission. His mission is to reconnect all these people or find new kids for him, but he's just not very good at it. So she kind of takes it over, the fact that she's in New York for whatever period of time she seems to be allowed to run free, because Grandma's always fallen asleep in something or never asks her where she is. So she kind of connects with the Ryan Reynolds character and says, I will help you, because Ryan Reynolds takes her to a theme park where she used to go as a child, and within this is kind of a retirement centre, and this is where all these imaginary characters are. Zaimi, all different kind of styles and designs. They kind of have an audition, and she documents all of these in a kind of scrapbook, which you kind of see in the trailer, and obviously a few of the jokes are in the trailer. I don't think they are that funny, but anyway, she documents them, and then she goes to the kid that she met in the hospital and tries to see if any of those, basically, if a kid can see them, that's your imaginary friend. For some reason, she can see them all. Again, not really that explained, but so she tries to get one of the friends to connect with this young lad. Doesn't happen, and then she comes down to the conclusion that speaking to her grandmother, and in the photos of her grandmother when she was young as a dancer, she notices Blossom, the Phoebe Waller-Bridge character, is in the background. So that was her grandmother's imaginary friend. And then due to a scenario, which I won't really go into, her grandmother kind of connects, and Blossom and her are kind of connected together. This leads her on trying to connect a few other ones, mainly Blue, because that seems to be where the focus is, to mainly get Blue back with it. And then this kind of culminates with her having a realisation about the Ryan Reynolds character, which she only realises at the very end. Basically, she starts connecting the friends, then there's an emergency at the hospital. She runs to the hospital, her dad's all right, and stuff like that. He's only unconscious after the thing, and then he wakes up and it's all a miracle. When she turns around, all the imaginary friends that were there have disappeared, so has Ryan Reynolds. Then when she goes upstairs to find where his flat was, the old lady who scared her off comes out and opens it up, and it's just a storage cupboard. It's not a room that's not existed there. She doesn't know. Her dad comes home. He's all happy, like, well, we've got to go. As she's putting the stuff in the car, there's a box that was featured at the very beginning, which was her paintings and stuff like this. On it, she has a painting of her family, and when she folds it open, there's a clown, and that clown is actually Ryan Reynolds, and he was called Calvin. Obviously, they shortened it to Cal, and he was the imaginary friend from her childhood. No reference to any of this at all in the movie until this very end. I picked that twist up quite early, and I'll explain why later on. But anyway, so then she runs upstairs. He's kind of there. She hugs him, and Blossom's there and stuff. And then she goes back and basically lives with her dad, and the end of the story. So what did I think? And as you'll see, it is a very standard, almost, I'd say, average movie, except for a few points. There is, as the movie starts, I said it is so vague. The fact you have the kid growing up and you have flashbacks, you don't know anything about the mum, why she died, or any connection to that, or even when she dies. There is no connection to any imaginary friends until she stumbles across Blossom and then Calvin, who is her imaginary friend. Now, there's a reason for that. It's obviously trying to be a coping mechanism because her dad is in the hospital. But again, for her dad, he's in the hospital and you don't know why. and this is the thing, there are so many vague things, it's hard to connect with this story. Because, I mean, the fact that Dad's called Dad, he doesn't even have kind of a name. And stuff like this. And if it's like her mum had died of cancer, then you'd be like, okay, right, it doesn't connect to that. And it should have had something of her having, you should have seen Calvin in his clown get up, maybe not his face, when she was a child, connecting with him. And when her mum dies, she realised that she has to grow up and she doesn't believe in imaginary friends. Calvin disappears. Then later on, she could be like, her dad's in hospital. He has not necessarily cancer, but it could be something that could go wrong. And if you'd given more facts for that, I think it would have made the audience, even though it's more for kids, I think it still would have, you would have to rate a little bit more how serious the operation was, because it could have been something very routine and she's overreacting. We will never know. Then that would have put more emphasis on she needed help or needed support, and this is why Calvin came back. And it's kind of the connection she makes with Calvin, kind of realizes how she can then see everybody else's imaginary friends, because that is never really explained. All the ifs, the imaginary friends, they're weird and wonderful characters. So you have Blue. First off, I'll try and go through this. He's the big purple thing. But I like Steve Carell. Literally, it sounds like a bumbling version of Gru. I really think some of the character designs ain't the greatest. I mean, they look nice, but they're not unique enough. And with the voice people, you just kind of relate to Gru in it. Him, if he was kind of a bit, or kind of his silly side, that is literally how this kind of big bumbling thing comes across. Phoebe Waller-Bridge, she doesn't have too much. She has a little bit of a dancing thing with her grandma. Again, it joins a connection, but because her grandmother is obviously quite old and it's a very classical dancing, I don't think a lot of people, especially young kids, would necessarily relate to that. Then you have a few other characters. So you have Aquafina's Bubble. She's not really in it. A lot of the ifs are not in it. Emily Blunt as a unicorn. Bradley Cooper as an ice cube in glass. He has a few points. Then you have George Clooney as a spaceman and Chris Morello as Cosmo. You also have credited as Brad Pitt as Keith. Now Keith, the invisible friend who you see in the trailer, they have a running joke with that, and I thought that was really good. Cosmo, he's kind of a detective, and he was really good. And these zany characters, they needed more of them. Having the melting marshmallow, which is voiced by John Krasinski as well, and Ryan Reynolds joke where he's got that didn't relate. I didn't find it funny. The joke had been, I didn't find it serious or anything like that. Then as you go along, so they do all these auditions, as I said earlier on, and as they're doing auditions, Ryan Reynolds opens a book, the same as B opens a book, and they both kind of do the same sort of motions when they're opening it. This was the first connection that I was like, well, Ryan Reynolds is connected to her. He's too similar on that aspect, and they're kind of doing the same job. A little while later, when Blue is trying to reconnect with his host, Ryan Reynolds and B walk into this office, and the receptionist only responds to B. And I'd be like, if a kid walked into your office with an adult, you would look to the adult, or at least say something to the adult, be like, oh, is your child, as well as responding to the kid. And she never does, which all made me, he's not there. And then you do kind of, no one ever links to him, even though they've been walking around New York all this time and something, which kind of ruins the whole illusion of the twist, because I saw it coming a mile away, and because you had no connection until you see a painting right at the end of the movie, like he was even around. I like John Krasinski. I like The Quiet Place. I thought this was very, very, I say average. I mean, I would give this a 5.4 out of 10. And I mean, this has gone down in my ratings. And the more and more I think about it, standardly, I would have given it 5. The only reason it's got 0.4 is because of the two if characters, Cosmo and Keith. And I think those running jokes work really well. I think the dad, for his little bit of comedy, works really well. But the story is really poor. It's too vague and too inconsistent, and there aren't enough things that work for you to relate to it. It's you kind of, you're just watching this rough story and going, well, I don't really know why the dad, as I say, the dad could have something simple like his appendix out or something. Because I mean, he's in hospital for days before they do the operation, and obviously not coming from America, I don't know if that's standard. For the UK, you would normally come in, they do the operation, and out you go. So that was because stuff like that isn't explained, the fact obviously like B can run around, there's all these things that just, it's almost like it is so far in a fantasy land and so vague that you can't, as I think I've said, I've connected to it. But anyway, that has been my movie review of the film If. Have you seen this movie? What did you think? Let me know in the comments down below. Otherwise, I've been Cypher Sigma Screen Time. Like, comment, and subscribe, and I shall see you in the next one.